Chapter 1: The Illusion of the Hero. When you look at this drawing, the first thing that hits you isn't a scene of heroic triumph, it's a feel of absolute suffocation. We see Paul Atreides in profile, his face locked in a solemn, hollow stare. His eyes are the striking blue within blue eyes of Ebad, the permanent physical stamp of the spice melange. But notice his clothes. He's wearing the royal indigo armor of the House Atreides, a callback to the oceans of Caladan and his father's noble legacy. Yet it's being swallowed up by a dusty, coarse desert cloak. Right here, the drawing gives us Paul's entire internal conflict. He is a boy caught between the aristocratic duty of the past and the brutal survival tactics required by his present. He isn't looking forward to a glorious future, he's staring blankly into a trap. The 8 hands, the machinery of the control. The most unsettling part of the image that I've drawn is the collection of 8 pale, disembodied hands reaching for him from every angle. They don't look like physical enemies trying to fight him. They look like a machine trying to manipulate a puppet. In Dune, Paul isn't ruined by a traditional villain. He's ruined by the system. Look at the hands on the left side of his face, one pressed hard against his forehead and eyebrow, literally blinding his upper vision. This is the Oracle trap. By using prescience to see the future, Paul locks himself into a deterministic nightmare. The moment he sees a timeline, he freezes into place, stripping away his own free will. Just below that, a hand cups his jaw and chin, a clear nod to the voice and the way his speech is conditioned and weaponized by his upbringing. On the right, a hand claws at the crown of his hair. This represents the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, who spent 90 generations manipulating bloodlines just to engineer his birth. They don't view him as a person, they view him as an intellectual property. Below that, another hand grabs him tightly by his purple collar, practically choking him. This is the Missionara Protectiva, the artificial religious myths planted on Arrakis centuries ago. Paul didn't earn the title of Messiah. It was a prefabricated safety net designed to make the freemen worship him so he could survive. As we look lower, the hand pulls his body in opposite directions. On the right, a hand grips his shoulder and cloak, the heavy, unyielding ghost of his father, Duke Leto, demanding aristocratic honor and revenge. On the left, a hand pressed flat against his chest, the crushing weight of fanatical Fremen demanding he leads them to paradise. At his hip, a hand grips him from behind, a reminder of his hidden Harkonnen genetics pulling him towards cruelty, and finally, near his waist, a hand hovers right over his sword hilt, tempting him to draw his weapon, seize the throne, and unleash chaos to protect his family. Paul isn't a survivor, he's a biological product trapped in a chokehold by history, religion, and politics. Chapter 3: Walking on Skulls. The environment that is drawn tells the story of the consequences. The ground is a jarring, solid field of red, completely covered in thousands of tiny gray and white pebbles. Visually, this acts as a brilliant, chilling metaphor for the jihad. The red field is the literal ocean of blood spilled in Paul's name, the 61 billion lives his fanatic legions will end. The gray stones scattered across it look less like pebbles and more like bleached, weathered skulls, left to rot in the sand. Paul isn't marching down a path of glory, he's walking across a mass grave that he built. Behind him, the twin dark volcanic peak eruptions with ash into the sky show the volatile nature of the universe. The old empire was a pressure cooker of corporate greed, feudal backstabbing, and religious engineering. Paul didn't create the explosions, he was just the catalyst. But once he stepped into that role, the eruptions became a force that even his godlike foresight couldn't control. Chapter 4: The Moons and the Lost Compass. Look up at the sky. The drawings feature 2 completely asymmetric moons, which perfectly mirror the fracture in Paul's identity. On the left, we have the small crescent moon, known as Muad'Dib. It bears the faint pattern of a desert kangaroo mouse, an animal that survives not by conquering the desert, but by quietly adapting to it. Paul chooses this name because he wants to stay humble, to remain human, and to find a peaceful way out. But the tragedy of the name is linguistic. In ancient tongues, Muad'Dib also means the teacher or the discipliner, someone who corrects through harshness. The quiet mouse is instantly weaponized by his followers, turning it into a terrifying war cry chanted by billions of soldiers. On the right side sits the massive full moon, known as the Hand of God. Look at the texture. It is drawn to look like a giant clenched fist hovering over the landscape. In the lore of Arrakis, this moon is so massive that its gravitational pull violently disrupts the planet's magnetic fields, making traditional compasses completely useless. This is the ultimate thematic takeaway of it. Under the shadow of the Hand of God, you lose you lose your bearing. As Paul absolute power grows, his moral compass is entirely shattered. To ensure the survival of his loved ones, he has to abandon his father's honor and operate in a landscape of pure terror. Chapter 5, The Conclusion, The Monster and the Preacher. Ultimately, Paul is a deeply human character who is crushed by his own conscience. He looks down the timeline and sees the golden path, the horrific, tyrannical route humanity must take to ensure its long-term survival. It requires a ruler to sacrifice their humanity, transform into a literal monster, and rule with an iron fist for thousands of years. Paul turns away from it because he loves his wife. He grieves his father, and he is simply too human to bear that kind of loneliness. Because he shrinks from being the monster, his empire rots into a bureaucratic holy war. He walks into the desert to die, only to return years later as the preacher, a blind, broken old man screaming in the streets against his own church, begging the people to tear down the very myth depicted in the storyboards. This drawing captures the exact moment the trap snaps shut. It shows us the Messiah, who is entirely powerless, standing on a floor of blood, held fast by the dead hands of the past, looking out at a world where even the moons have taken away their sense of direction. It stands as Frank Herbert's ultimate warning: beware of charismatic heroes, beware the system that creates them will always outlast them.